He gasped, then collapsed to his knees, hands shaking, overwhelmed by the moment he had never dared to dream of. The confetti glowed in the lights, swirling around him like a hug from the universe. The judges stood cheering. The audience screamed in joy. Crew members backstage cheered with pride. And Ernesto, crying, shaking, smiling through tears, looked up at the falling gold with pure disbelief and gratitude. He raised his hands toward the confetti, whispering, "Mom, this is for you." The world watched, hearts cracked open, as a 54-year-old man who had carried a lifetime of pain finally felt seen, heard, and loved. Ernesto wiped his tears, hand trembling as he lowered it. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His throat tightened, his lips trembled. The only thing he managed was a soft, whispered, "Thank you." Thank you." Howie took a moment before speaking. He looked unusually serious. "You know, Ernesto," he said, voice gentle, "this show sees thousands of singers every season. Thousands. But what you did, I think it's once in a lifetime. That was healing. For you, and for all of us." The audience erupted in agreement, cheering loudly, many still wiping tears. Then, an unexpected chant began from somewhere in the upper rows. "Golden buzzer. Golden buzzer. Golden buzzer." It started slow but quickly spread like wildfire. Soon, the entire studio, thousands of voices, were chanting in rhythm, stomping their feet, clapping their hands. Even people backstage joined in. The whole building vibrated with the sound. Ernesto shook his head in disbelief. He brought both hands to his face and sobbed openly, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude so deep it almost hurt. Simon turned around and exchanged glances with the other judges. Heidi nodded. Sophia nodded. Howie gave an encouraging smile. It was as if all of them were silently agreeing, this man deserved more than applause. He deserved a moment he would remember for the rest of his life. Simon stepped out from behind the judges' table. The audience went wild. He walked slowly toward the golden buzzer, his face still soft with emotion. Ernesto froze on stage, his breath catching. The world seemed to slow down. Simon placed a hand on the golden buzzer. Looked up at Ernesto. And smiled, a warm, genuine, human smile. "This," he said softly, "is for your mother." And with one swift motion, he slammed his hand down. The buzzer exploded to life. A thunderous sound filled the studio. Golden confetti burst from the ceiling, cascading over Ernesto like shimmering memories falling from the sky. Simon leaned forward slightly, placing both hands on the table, his expression caught between shock and admiration. The camera zoomed in on him, his eyes glistening, his throat visibly tightening as he prepared to speak. "Ernesto," he began, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. It wasn't the commanding tone, the judging tone, or even the encouraging tone he used for great performances. This was something else. Something personal. "I don't even know where to begin." The audience fell silent instantly. Simon inhaled deeply, almost as if steadying himself. "What you did just now, wasn't just singing. It wasn't just performing." He paused again, searching for the right words. "You opened your heart in a way that very, very few people ever can. You gave us a piece of your soul." Ernesto looked down, overwhelmed, tears finally breaking free and rolling down his cheeks. Simon continued, his voice cracking slightly. "I felt every word. Every breath. Every single moment." He blinked fast, too fast, the way someone does when they're trying not to cry on camera. The audience noticed, and soft murmurs spread across the room. Simon Cowell, emotional? Truly emotional? That alone felt historic. Heidi was the next to rise. She stood with a hand pressed over her heart, shaking her head as she spoke. Ernesto, I haven't cried like that from a song in so long. Her voice broke. Your voice isn't about perfection, it's about truth. Your mother would be so proud of you. Sophia leaned forward, her eyes shimmering. When you sang, it felt like you brought her here with us. I could feel her. I could feel your love for her. And it touched everyone in this room tonight. No one expected a 54-year-old man to walk in and shatter the AGT stage. But when Ernesto started singing, the entire audience stopped breathing. Ernesto stepped onto the AGT stage with a quiet heaviness that instantly shifted the energy in the entire auditorium. The lights dimmed just enough to make his figure stand out, thin shoulders, slightly bent posture, and hands that trembled ever so slightly as he walked toward the center. He didn't rush. Every step seemed deliberate, as though he was walking toward something he had waited a lifetime to face. The audience, usually loud and buzzing with excitement, softened to a gentle murmur. People leaned forward, sensing something unusual in the air. Perhaps it was the way Ernesto carried himself, calm, humble, and full of something deeper than nervousness. It felt like grief wrapped in courage. He reached the X mark on the stage and slowly lifted his head. The giant AGT star shimmered behind him, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes scanned the judges' table, landing first on Simon, then moving to Heidi, Howie, and Sophia. They watched him with curiosity, unsure what to expect from the 54-year-old man standing silently before them. Simon cleared his throat and leaned forward with his signature directness. Good evening. What's your name? The tone was neutral, but there was a hint of gentleness, something rare from him. Ernesto adjusted the microphone with both hands, trying to steady them. My name is Ernesto, he said, his voice barely above a breath. There was warmth in it, but also an unmistakable weight, like someone who had spent many years holding back words he never got to say. Simon nodded. And Ernesto, why have you come to AGT? The question hung in the air. A few seconds passed, longer than expected. Ernesto swallowed hard, eyes glistening in the spotlight. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked just slightly. I'm here, to sing a song I wrote, he said. A song for someone who will never hear it. The audience tensed, curious and moved. Even the judges leaned closer, sensing the emotional undercurrent beneath his words. Ernesto took a shaky breath before continuing. I wrote it after losing my mother. She always waited for me to come home, no matter how late. Every night, she'd sit by the door just to see me walk in. His lips tightened, trying to keep his emotions controlled. But I never got the chance to say goodbye. And now the image of her waiting, it stays with me. Always. A hush fell over the auditorium. Even the most talkative audience members went silent. Some pressed their hands over their mouths. Others exchanged glances, their expressions softening with sympathy. He blinked a few times, trying to clear the tears that threatened to fall. The song is called, Still Waiting at the Door, he said quietly. It's everything I wished I said to her. Everything I didn't know how to say before. Sophia placed a hand over her chest, visibly touched. Heidi whispered something under her breath, something like, oh wow. Howie straightened, his usual light-hearted demeanor replaced by something more solemn. Simon's face softened, his eyes narrowing in that way he does when something real grabs his attention. Ernesto shifted his weight, still clearly nervous, but there was a quiet determination beneath it. The kind that comes from years of carrying a story, waiting for the right moment to let it go. A stagehand dimmed the lights even further until Ernesto stood in a lone white spotlight. The rest of the stage receded into shadow, creating the feeling that he stood alone in a world of his memories. The silence grew so thick that even a breath could be heard. Ernesto closed his eyes for a moment. Not to collect himself, but almost as if he were picturing his mother sitting there, waiting, just like she always did. He whispered something under his breath, maybe a small prayer or a message meant only for her. With the microphone held close, he looked up once more. His expression wasn't nervous anymore. It was raw, open, full of a lifetime's worth of unspoken love. The kind of expression only someone who had truly lived could show. The music team cued the soft piano intro, slow, haunting, almost like a lullaby mixed with heartbreak. It echoed through the theater with a gentle ache. Every judge leaned forward unconsciously. Every audience member sat a little straighter. The room felt suspended in time. Ernesto took one more slow, deep breath, the kind that happens right before a person lets go of something they've been holding onto for far too long. Then, with a trembling voice filled with pain, love, and years of silence, he began to sing. The first note that left Ernesto's lips felt like a whisper pulled from the deepest part of his soul. It wasn't loud. It wasn't polished. It was fragile, so fragile that for a moment the audience didn't even realize he had begun. But the emotion in that single note hit harder than any power belt or vocal trick could. It was the kind of sound that made people stop breathing without noticing. As the soft piano carried him forward, Ernesto's voice grew steadier, each word blossoming with a lifetime of memories. Behind him, the LED screens lit up with warm, nostalgic images: a modest home, a wooden door slightly ajar, a woman's silhouette waiting patiently under a dim porch light. The visuals were subtle, but powerful enough to tug at the heart. Ernesto sang as though each lyric was pulled directly from moments he had lived through, regrets he couldn't escape, and a love that never truly faded. His voice carried the ache of time, cracked edges, trembling breaths, and the kind of truth you can't teach. It wasn't perfect, but that was exactly why it felt so painfully real. By the time he reached the first chorus, the entire theater was frozen in silence. People weren't just listening, they were feeling. His voice carried a story that everyone could relate to in some way: losing someone, missing someone, wishing for one more moment, one more hug, one more word. He sang, "I still see your shadow waiting at the door, calling me home the way you did before." His voice broke slightly on the word home, and that tiny crack hit the audience like a blade. It wasn't forced, it was the crack of a man revisiting wounds that never fully healed. In the judges' panel, Heidi pressed a hand over her mouth. Sophia tilted her head, her eyes already glossy. Howie looked down, blinking slowly, breathing deeply, the kind of breath taken to steady emotions. But the biggest surprise was Simon. The man known for his cold composure and sharp critiques had softened entirely. His eyebrows pinched together, jaw gently clenched, as though he too was holding back something heavy. The camera cut to the audience, faces streaked with tears, a teenage girl wiping her cheeks with her sleeves, a middle-aged man clutching his chest with trembling fingers, a mother hugging her young daughter a little closer. The story Ernesto told wasn't just his anymore. It became everyone's story. Everyone who had ever lost someone felt their own memories rising to the surface. As Ernesto continued, the LEDs shifted to a soft golden glow, displaying a moving image of an empty chair beside a door. The symbolism was delicate yet devastating. His voice carried the next verse with deeper emotion, as though the memories were coming faster than he could control. "I walked too far, for far too long, never knowing I'd return to find you gone." His throat tightened again. His breath caught. But instead of ruining the song, it made the performance even more powerful. He pushed through it, letting the raw emotion shake through every note. Midway through the performance, something remarkable happened. The audience, normally filled with whispers, cheers, or reactions, stayed completely silent. It was a silence so thick, so charged, that even the soft hum of the stage monitors felt loud. People weren't just spectators. They were witnesses to a man opening the deepest wound of his life. The camera panned backstage, where crew members had paused what they were doing. One of them leaned against a wall, blinking quickly as if trying to hold back tears. Another pressed her headset tighter, pretending she was adjusting audio levels, but her trembling hand exposed the truth: she was moved, too. As the bridge approached, the music swelled, and Ernesto lifted his gaze slowly, as if searching for his mother in the sea of lights ahead. His voice grew stronger, more resolute, as if singing not from pain anymore, but from love. "If I could go back, I'd run through that door. I'd hold you close like never before." The emotion in the room was overwhelming. A woman in the second row covered her face with both hands. A young boy squeezed his father's arm. Even Simon shifted in his seat, his eyes glistening. The camera caught a rare moment. Simon blinking repeatedly, fighting to maintain control as the song cracked open something inside him. Ernesto stepped slightly forward, gripping the microphone with both hands. His voice rose to its most powerful point, not through volume, but through pure, vulnerable truth. The LED screen slowly faded to white, as though symbolizing a soul, a memory, a goodbye. "And though you're gone, I still see you. Still waiting at the door." The final line floated into the air like a quiet confession. His voice trembled and cracked in the last word, and then the music faded. For 2 full seconds, nothing happened. No applause. No movement. No sound. Just stunned silence. Then, a tidal wave of applause erupted from the audience. A roar of emotion, shock, and overwhelming admiration. People shot to their feet instantly, clapping, crying, cheering, some shaking their heads in disbelief at what they'd just witnessed. Ernesto stood frozen, breathing heavily, tears streaming down his face. His shoulders trembled as he looked out at a theater full of people standing because of him, because of his story, because of his pain. And for the first time in decades, he felt his mother with him, not waiting at the door, but standing right there in the applause, proud of the son who finally found the courage to sing. The applause thundered through the entire auditorium, shaking the very walls of the AGT studio. Ernesto stood in the middle of the stage, chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. Tears clung to the edges of his eyes, not from weakness, but from decades of bottled-up emotion finally being released. The golden lights reflected off his cheeks, making them shimmer as though the stage itself was honoring the moment. It wasn't just an ovation. It was a release, an outpouring of love from thousands of people who felt his pain as if it were their own. When the applause finally softened enough for the judges to speak, Simon slowly rose from his seat. The audience reacted instantly, gasps, whispers, even more cheers. Simon Cowell didn't stand often. And he certainly didn't stand for emotional ballads unless they were truly extraordinary, but this time, he didn't just stand. He stood with purpose. Ernesto's eyes widened in disbelief. For a split second, he looked like he couldn't comprehend what was happening. He placed a shaky hand over his heart, overwhelmed by the sight of the toughest judge in the world rising for him.